Okay, now let's talk about the resume exercise as we're getting going on this major project. Again, the finished project, when it's all done, will be worth half your grade, but all these individual pieces are graded separately. The first part is to get as I warned you, you would need this week, I warned you last week, you need a regular on-paper resume, except hopefully a bit bigger and longer than a normal resume. Some people say that a resume is supposed to fit on one page. This is something bigger and longer than that. So don't worry if it doesn't fit on one page. In fact, it's better if it's multiple pages. And also don't worry about fancy formatting, aligning, rules, art, so on. None of that's going to matter because later, of course, what you're going to do when you move into part 2 is convert that all to HTML. And of course, HTML is not going to do any of that stuff. We're just going to want structure. So if you're starting from scratch, hopefully you already started before this because I warned you, or if you found your old resume and you dusted it off and you updated it, and you're saying, oh, well, this stuff is not quite the same font or it doesn't line up quite the same way, don't worry about that stuff. That's presentation. That's different, right? Okay. So you could just grab your old resume, dust it off, and submit it by 10 o'clock on Friday as a Word document or a PDF and be all set. But I would suggest instead, or in addition, what you do is after you get that resume and you dust it off and you update it, you really need to start making some additions. And it'd be easier to start that now, this week, rather than have to do it all next week when you change it into HTML, right? So let's go down and look at the instructions. This is a generic document, not made for any particular job, not written for a particular employer. It might be you want a general type of job and you're writing it in that way for that industry maybe. Otherwise, it's just generically about you in general. It will have, if you think about what a resume is, all it is really is headings, right? Lists, like lists of when things were, what things were, where they were. Lots of those are unordered lists, right? And paragraphs of description. And sometimes lists that are like a thing and a description, like maybe a job and a description. That, of course, would be DLs. So you should start to think about your resume that it's actually really the sort of thing that works well with HTML structure. Of course, your resume will have your name on the top of it. I say you have to have at least 8 of these categories. You can call them different things. You don't have to call them these things. And maybe you'll have some more. And if you really don't have anything that fits into a certain category, don't make it up. But I think you shouldn't have any trouble getting at least 8 of these and probably more. You don't have to have all these right now, as I said, and the more you can add now, better. So this stuff really is under part 2, right? But again, jump into this now would make things easier. But of course, you could have your name, contact information. If your resume already has contact information, you can take it out now or later. But we're not going to use contact information in that way at this time, so don't worry about that. Likewise, we're not going to do references at this time. Not sure if we're going to do references at all. We frequently don't, because that's putting someone's personal information, like phone number and stuff, on the web. So we generally don't do references. You can always have a line that says references are available on request, and that might go someplace. But don't worry about it now. Objective. You might have, your resume probably already has some kind of objective or something. It usually comes after your name. We'll call this category objective or something like that, goal, or some people call it an executive summary, other things too. And then that'll be followed by a paragraph that describes what is the objective of this resume. Then your employment history, or jobs, or work history, or whatever you call it, right? In every case where we have multiple items, and you probably will in this one, we always put the newest thing first. The newest thing first. So you're going to list all your jobs, but you're not just going to list them. I want that to know where, in a list form, where, when, what the title was or something. And then in a paragraph form, I want to know, in the case of the jobs, everything about how this job applies to your objectives, for instance, what you got out of it. And I think any job you get something out of, right? If you're a babysitting job, working at McDonald's, there's definitely work skills there, and it's useful. So every job, pretty much, you should put down here. Internships, if you've had any, either organized ones through the college or something that's more like an internship, maybe even high school or something. Again, you could list them, probably in its own category. Think about it, these categories. Although your name is your H1, and of course you're not doing an HTML yet, I'm just telling you to think about it. All these other categories are probably going to be H2s, right? Makes sense, right? Okay, and then so internships. Then education. You certainly have education. In fact, education will be probably one of your most important categories, I would guess. And probably the one on the top will be SUNY Plattsburgh. You're going to do a lot with education here. And it's more than just list the college and the degree and when you expect to graduate. It's going to be paragraphs of text, and we'll look at some samples in a minute. College activities or publications or sports or what clubs or whatever. Make categories for those things, all the things you did at college. If you have other colleges you went to first, put those in here, and their stuff, they use those things in this other category too. In your education, you might very well even put high school in. Skills is something you might or might not have in your existing resume, but we'll take a look at some examples of kind of skills. Often there's two lists of skills. There's like hard skills and soft skills, or some people say like computer skills or tech skills, and then personal skills. Volunteerism and community service, you almost certainly have something to put in here. And again, if you have multiple things, it'd be in reverse chronological order, with the place or the job, and then the when and the where, and then a little bit about what you did yourself or in a group or something. Awards, honors, and accomplishments, everything from the dean's list to certificates to whatever. And an interest and hobbies. I want everybody has to have this category, interest and hobbies. You've got some interest or hobbies, which you will describe or just list depending on what kind of detail you want to give. So, part one this week, go ahead and get it all on paper and submit it in a Word doc or a PDF. Part two, yeah, it's not due for another week, but there's no reason you can't start it right away. Why don't you, when you have time over the weekend, for instance, make up your folder structure as I suggest here. Of course, your original resume will probably go into that originals resource kind of folder. Your root folder is called resume and your last name, and then or Resume1 and your name or your first name, whatever, something like that. And then you actually have, well, at this point, only one HTML document. So this is an example where I'm asking you to submit a zipped root folder. Then when we move on to part two, that is, even though there's only one HTML document. And it's just to stay in that practice of doing a zipped root folder. So you're still going to do a zipped root folder, even though it's just one document. And then there's some notes here, which we'll go over again when we do part two. So I'm just saying, you don't have to wait for my feedback on part one to get started on part two, because I will be telling you more things you need to add or things you need to change or something, right? And then you can work those into the HTML document as you have it together. So consider doing that to save yourself some time. Move right from part one to part two.